Welcome everyone to another episode of JourneyCast. I'm Levi, and this is my co-host.
I'm Alicia.
And today we're joined by our worship pastor, Wade Hodgman.
Hi, everyone.
Wade, welcome here.
Do I look at the camera?
You can if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Hi.
You can look wherever you want.
Fun fact about Wade. Wade started out here in youth ministry.
Yes.
These are his favorite days to remember.
Was that his staff position in youth, or just like as a volunteer?
Oh, we paid him. He had to show up.
Yeah.
Well, if we go all the way back to the beginning
Yeah.
to 2008,
That's when you moved
Ooh.
here.
that's when I moved to Medicine Hat, and I did volunteer with youth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't even know who the youth pastor was at the time. It might have actually been Dave just
Ooh,
exiting,
fun.
maybe. I know there
Oh,
was
maybe,
a Mike
yeah.
stint after that.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
it might have been.
that would have been like the beginning of Hillcrest.
Well, and you just came to Friday events, didn't you?
I don't know. I do have a memory of being in the gym. I
Yeah.
remember like Kyle and Jamie were with me, and we just showed
Yeah.
up, and people were like, "Who are these?
Yeah.
Who are these people?"
Really
just
cool people.
just
These
like
punk rockers.
doing stuff right away. We don't even know you, kind of. So
I remember seeing in church these two guys that were like really punk and cool, sitting off to the side. I'm like, who are those two guys? Like,
why are their pants so tight?
why are their pants?
Why do I want to be like
Like,
them?
I heard someone. Oh, I think they just like moved here. I'm like, oh, cool. And then like in a few weeks, you're like playing guitar on stage. I'm like, oh wow, they're like volunteering right away.
Next thing you know, I'm your brother-in-law.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fun fact: Wade is married to my sister. So, and we get to work together too. Yeah, so you moved here in 2008 and you helped with youth for a bit. What brought you to Medicine Hat?
So, my brother, Kyle, who we've already mentioned, his wife, Jamie, my sister-in-law, she was just looking to do, I think it's called speech language assistant, and it was either Edmonton or Medicine Hat, and I think they just decided they didn't want to be in a big center, so they chose Medicine Hat, and then... So me and my brother were always playing in punk rock bands growing up, and I was just like, that sounds like something we should continue to do. So I just kind of followed them, and I just moved to Medicine Hat so we could keep playing music together. That's how I ended up here. So
Yeah.
What was the name of your band in case someone wants to look it up?
So the longest standing name with stuff on like Spotify and YouTube, and that would be The Social Threat. So if you want to look that up on YouTube or Spotify, you can hear me kind of, it's not quite screaming, but there's a little angst in the voice. So
I think like some of your earlier stuff was a little more screamy than your later stuff.
everyone mellows with age, you know?
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
And then what got you into doing worship? Like, I guess so if you want to go all the way back, you could,
Yeah.
like your dad kind of told
Yeah,
you guys
so-
to be on a worship team.
Yeah. My dad was really influential on me and my brother. So Kyle, it's funny how much Kyle's come up already because we just have a lot of shared experience, and we're like a year and a half or so apart, and we just kind of grew up playing music together. So I was about 8 years old, which would make Kyle about 10, and my dad was like a worship leader at our church plant of about like 40 or 50 people, and he's like, well, I need a band. So you're on bass, you're on drums. And every Sunday we played. So that's kind of where it began. So I was 8 years old when I first started playing bass at church. So
Did your dad teach you, or did you just like
I'm
watch
sure my dad-
YouTube or
we didn't have internet when I was 8. So, right. I'm that old. I mean, there was internet. We didn't have
yeah,
internet.
and it was probably pre YouTube.
Yeah, I think it would have been.
Yeah.
I actually joined school band. So I was like, I remember playing bass beside this little Filipino guy, and he was playing trombone. And I remember I would learn, like, they had the slide positions on trombone. So, like, you don't have, like, right? So it's, like, kind of by ear / like how long your arm is. But I remember this one note, he had to like reach all the way out to make the note hit. But yeah, that's my first kind of band memories, I guess, would be school band. So I could actually, like, I can't even read notation anymore, but at the time I could read the bass clef, and that's how I first got. So I think I must have learned a bit there, and then whatever my dad showed me, and then
your school band sounds cooler than my school band. Yeah.
To have an electric bass, like to have a bass guitar.
Like I had to play the clarinet.
Well, it wasn't an upright.
No, it was an electric bass. Like
I was picturing you with an upright bass.
No, that would be way cooler. Yeah.
That would be cool. Like a double bass, like
And then there's like no frets, right? You gotta know exactly where to hold it.
Yeah,
that'd be scary. Mm-hmm. So you've shared your testimony at youth before, and I thought it was interesting, kind of your heart and passion for things in life. So worship wasn't really like your number one passion at one point, right? So what brought you from just playing bass for your dad because you had to, to now like being a worship pastor, being passionate about the ministry and caring about it so much? Yeah.
So like, it's a little confusing because I always did play in church. Like I did start at 8, and then I think even like when I was 12, like grade 7, I started leading worship at a youth group. And that's like part of why I'm so passionate about getting our youth involved now, because I just started out really early. So that always was there, but yeah, Levi's right. It wasn't always maybe my forefront. So like, I always loved just like playing in bands, just making music with friends, and just always really loved music. But yeah, around, and we did that a lot. Like I think it was about, I don't even know how many years we toured, like pretty, I mean, not like
your worship team?
No.
Oh.
Like with the Social Threat, like we were busy. I mean, there was always church stuff kind of mixed in, but I think I maybe did take a break from it at one point where we got really busy with the band. So there was a lot of weekends where we were going, and like we were playing quite a few shows. But yeah, so at one point, maybe this is what Levi's getting at with my testimony, but I went away to YWAM, Youth with a Mission, and it just felt like kind of like a crossroads in my life. And I just felt like there was more that God had for me. So I was working a mechanic's job, and I was doing like punk rock band kind of on the side, and it was busy, but I just felt a little unfulfilled, a little angry, a little unsettled.
So at that point, when you're just like working at the mechanic shop and doing that, like, is that your goal to like do punk music full time, or was it just like, I'm going to keep working and like just enjoy doing band stuff on the side? Like,
we're like, me and my brother always really driven and passionate about music, and we were trying to make the most of it and do as much as we possibly could.
Yeah.
I think there was a realization at one point that like our favorite punk rock bands were just like driving around the country in a stinky van on weekends. So we had already kind of reached like what our favorite band, not that we had like as many big shows or whatever as them,
but they're not playing Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, they're not playing these huge venues for like a lot of people. So there wasn't like, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, it'd be great to play awesome shows.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was like a realistic or even like something we were trying to like aspire to. We were just like
doing it full time.
Yeah. We were just trying to do the best that we could. So that wasn't even really like, I need to quit my day job. We didn't get anywhere close to that.
So you just felt unsatisfied at this point to just like,
I
working and just doing, touring.
The daily grind, the 8 to 5 kind of thing. And I was just, a little unsettled. So I got, I don't know, it felt like God was speaking to me, and he's like, okay, like the next chapter of your life is coming, like the next thing. And it was just clear. And I remember, so I tell this as part of my testimony, was myself, Kyle, and Elise, our old worship pastor. We were leading this prayer time in Hub 1 in the coffee house. And we were just, I think it was even before we had gone up, and I think Elise just said like, I think you're going somewhere. And I was just like, bah! And I just like started crying. That's all she said.
Yeah.
And it was like this truth that she spoke lined up with this truth that God was telling me. And they just like connected. And I was like, this is happening.
Yeah.
This is real. God's speaking to me, and he's also speaking through people. So yeah, like, I don't even know, like we could go into an hour on like prophetic words. And I know people have a million opinions on those. And like, especially if you're like from a more conservative background like myself, anything like prophetic or prophecy or whatever, you're kind of like, whoa, like I don't want to go.
Yeah.
But
you don't
like,
want to be misled by anything or.
But I've seen it. I've seen God use other people to speak into your life. And I know I've been able to speak into other people's lives with the Holy Spirit working through me in a way that it's like, that's what they needed to hear. Right. So I really believe in that kind of prophetic word because it was important in my life. So then I was like, just the way it hit me, right? I was like, okay, like I am going away for a while and I'm going to pursue kind of like a new path. So yeah, like I quit my job as a mechanic and I think I'd been there like 7 years or something. And I got my journeyman ticket. So it wasn't like I was just a part-time job at like somewhere. Like it was kind of like a career type job. And they were kind of like, well, when will you be back? And I was like, no, I'm quitting. Like I'm putting my notice in.
I'm not guaranteeing I'm coming back to this.
So I just remember God leading me. I ended up at YWAM Denver, is where I went. And I knew a few people who had gone there. But yeah, it was just God's leading. And I had so much peace driving. Like I was driving down there and I was just leaving my life behind basically. And I had this incredible peace that I was following God's plan for my life. And I hadn't had that before, like with more major decisions. Like I went to Bible school for a year and I never had that kind of peace that I had when I went to YWAM Denver. And it was like amazing. It was like, I think my heart was just soft, right? To what God had for me. So I was just kind of like, hey, God, like whatever you want to show me during these like months, whatever you have next for me in my life, I'm just like open, right? And like, yeah, if you say that to God, if you pray that to God, like he's going to show up and he's going to do stuff, right? So
was that like a scary concept for you to leave behind like a good job and that, or were you like kind of at that point like
I was
ready to do that?
I was pretty unsettled. So I think a new chapter was good for me. But yeah, I think more just like
obviously having people speak that into your life is like, I know this is right, but it's still like
scary, you don't know what you're. I remember like kind of like, what am I doing? You don't know a single person down there. Like you don't know what you're getting yourself into. Yeah. And I think trust for me, like I still struggle with trusting God every day. And it's like one of those things, it's like you read like his plans for you are good and you know it and you believe it, but just to like hold your life with an open hand and actually be like, I'm going to be obedient. Whatever you call me to, it's just, even though like he has such a perfect like track record and he never screws anything up, you're still just like, I just want to like,
this is new, right? Like, that's familiar. That's familiar.
Yeah.
Anything new, it's like, but what about this time?
Yeah. So, I mean, God was teaching me trust like through all of that. But yeah, he just really, like the teaching there was amazing. The people I met were amazing. But the thing that was most transformative was just being soft and open to what God had for me, right? So, I mean, this is like a long way around, but there was this conference type of weekend that they were having when we were down there. And it was kind of like, just the way they described it, I was like, this sounds like an event that I will hate. Kind of thing. Like, just so open-ended. Like, if you know me, I'm like pretty structured. I like organization. I want to know what's what. I like details. And
I think, there's some people that just like to know what to expect, right? Like before they come to something like, okay, what is going to happen here? What can I expect? What am I going to get from this before I commit to anything? Yeah,
if you think about any like church service or like anything, like you usually kind of know but they were like, we'll kind of have open-ended worship and then we'll just like have a prayer time, and then maybe like some people will speak some words over you. But it was just like, and I was like kind of like, man, this sucks. Like I was kind of like begrudgingly going. But I just remember like I was walking across this parking lot. It was like the YWAM base, and then we were using this like local church for this weekend. And I remember walking across the parking lot and just praying like, God, if you have anything for me this weekend, like I'm open to it. Like I didn't, people are like, I didn't feel it or whatever. I was like, I was not feeling it, but I just like prayed that despite that feeling that God would take it and use it and like that I would get the most out of it.
Because you do want to get something out of it. And you're like, I'm not getting anything. Can I get something out of this?
And it's like anything, right? Like we have I feel like, chew the meat, spit out the bone, or like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, like all these things. And it's just like, I feel like everyone now is like, cancel culture, right? Like they said one thing, like toss them out. And I just felt like you'll be tossing stuff out your whole life if there's one bit of whatever. Anyway, so even like a speaker that you were like, I don't know if I believe everything they say, that's fine. Like I think God wants you to be like,
yes, test it.
Right? Test it against the word, test it against your, like what you know to be true. So like that was my whole attitude, but it was like, you have to learn to not say that speaker says something that you don't agree with and you even think isn't like biblical, right? Like you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's not right. And I'm going to like disregard that. But then the next sentence he says could be pure truth. So if you throw it all out because he said that one thing, you're missing out on God speaking to you through all these other things. So I just went in with that attitude. God, if there's anything at all that you want to speak to me.
You can't just like flick the switch like, okay, I'm here, but I'm not listening anymore.
Right. And that is so easy to do, right? Yeah. You're listening to a pastor preach, you're whatever. You hear one thing, you're like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And then you just like, you shut off your brain, right? You're like, he doesn't have anything of value. You're going to miss out on so many good things if you just like toss it. So that weekend for me was just like, God showed up. Like I had these main questions and I was just like, hey God, what do you want me to do with my life? Like, who do you want me to marry? Like these questions everyone's like asking, right? Maybe like in your 20s, right? Like it's like, those are questions, or 30s. Like that's what you're asking. And I was asking that, and I just feel like God showed up in such a cool way. And like, there was even like, I remember this guy, his name was, Dave. He was really cool. He was just a chill guy. He was he worked on the cars there at Youth with a Mission. And
so you could kind of connect with him.
Yeah, he was awesome. And he skateboarded. Like, it was just so cool. And, he just like spoke like some words over me. And it was like kind of the same thing with like like something, like you're just like, clicked and you were just like, I don't know. He said like, and it's such generic, so you wouldn't like, but it's just so powerful. Like he was just,
and there's no way for him to know that this is going to click with you.
Yeah,
it's not like people are like, oh, I know that if I say this, it'll get weighed all emotional. Like, and
like,
then
I can't even remember all the things he said, but like it was like, you're a good man or something like that, and I was like, So. But yeah, God really spoke to me about a music ministry. So that's the question that I think you had initially asked. And that was like kind of a turning point. And there was a few other people too there. And like, cause like they just kind of knew I had played in a band or whatever. And like our band was always a ministry. Like we were always a light in a dark place. Like there was literally like pubs and bars we played that like, I felt like you could feel the darkness there. And then we would play our set and like, we would feel peace and joy, and like other people would tell us that like something shifted in the room. Like there was so many ministry moments in our band. So it's not like it was like I was going from non-ministry to ministry.
It's just a different kind of ministry that people are used to.
There was a shift and people were like, maybe God has something else for you. And I struggled with that because sometimes I'm like, okay, if I'm playing like in a pub or whatever, it's like I'm bringing the truth to where there's no truth. And if you're playing in a church, you're kind of preaching to the choir type of thing. So I kind of struggled with that, like for a little bit. It's like, is this a lesser calling or whatever? But then I think just realizing it's like how much impact I could have in the church and like how much people need to be encouraged and the truth sung over them and with them all within the church is also like
So they can also
important.
be a light in those dark places
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a shift, but yeah, like I felt like God was saying like, I have this music ministry for you, and it was going to be like just a change, a shift from one, just different. So
So then, you come back from that. So at this point, you're already playing worship at like you were already playing on a team at Hillcrest, right?
yeah, so I think before, it's funny, it all kind of blends together, but I know I had played on teams.
Yeah.
Like I remember you said we got up on the stage
Yeah.
pretty fast kind
Yeah.
of thing. They
Were
were
you
looking
still just
for.
playing bass, or
I
were
was
you-
playing bass at the
Yeah.
time, yeah. Kyle went on drums pretty quick. I went on bass, and we just like held it down. It was Team Red, I think, is what it was.
Color
when we were
teams.
colors, yeah. Yeah, we were already playing. Like I was playing worship, but I think it maybe a little less. Like I said, when we got busy with the band, but.
What? So that YWAM base in Denver you went to, that was like for a music school, right? Their
Yeah.
school of music. What was like the big takeaway for you in that? You know, what was something that you like? I mean, not even just technically, but also like spiritually.
Yeah.
I guess like that event I know has meant a lot in different ways
Right.
for you. But what was that? What was that takeaway that you're like, oh, okay, you know, something that you learned from that?
I think what was interesting is that like it was. I feel like they tricked us because it was called a musician's DTS, and that's kind of like part of the reason why I signed up for it. So DTS is discipleship training school,
Yeah.
but then kind of found out like it was basically like a gathering of musicians to do a DTS, that there wasn't really even like a music like focus to it so much. Like we did a few like little things here and there. Like I think we did a 24/7 worship, like a 24-hour worship thing. And like I think there was like maybe some lessons you could do. But it was pretty minimal. So it was kind of like, but it was also still kind of cool because we had something in common, right? So people were just like jamming a lot and like, but yeah, like there wasn't actually like a lot of musical focus. So I like one thing that really resonates with me as like a major takeaway from DTS was actually I think it was one of the first weeks, and they call it Father Heart of God week. And there was this guy teaching it, and he was just teaching us about like who the Father is and how much he loves you and what he thinks of you. And so yeah, they kind of do like modular courses or so it was like 1 week on like Father Heart of God. And like there was this, I'm pretty sure it was this afternoon, and I don't know if we were like writing a letter to God or something. So the difference that I experienced between like, so I went to Bible school, and it felt like kind of like head knowledge, and there was like papers we had to write and like all good things to learn. But I felt like this DTS was way more like heart stuff. So yeah, he was leading us through this time, and I just felt like I told God I loved him for the first time. And I'm like, I became a Christian when I was like 5, but here I am like 25, and I'm like, God, I love you in return. And like I remember like saying that and like writing that, and like that was like a huge thing for me, a huge moment for me. And yeah, that's just like a major takeaway from that DTS. Nothing to do with music in any way, but just kind of like shaped me. So.
What would you say then? And I think that's like interesting. Like, yeah, I feel like I remember when I heard you say that one time when you were sharing your testimony. I was like, oh, yeah. How often do I say that I love you to God? Like, other than just singing along, Jesus, we love you. I mean, like, which we do, but like, wait, stop, think about that.
Right.
Do you love God? Well, I don't know. Like, well, there's all these things that he's done for you.
Right.
Like, isn't that great? You know, like that gratitude, that thankfulness and that thanksgiving. And then it's like, oh yeah, I guess I do. Like, Well, then tell him, you know, tell him how are you telling him, you know?
And I think like whenever I see like, this is like kind of directed at youth a little bit.
Yeah.
Whenever I see like a youth say or write, I love you to like another like teenager, I'm just kind of like, love means forever. You know, I don't know. That's kind of for me, like I always held that word as like special. Like, it's a choice.
Yeah.
And it means you're going to follow through. And it means you're living the rest of your life in that way because you committed, because you made that choice. So like the word love for me is like,
holds a lot of weight.
Yeah. And when I pictured saying, I love you to God, it means I am going to walk out the rest of my life living for you. Yeah. So to declare that, right? Yeah. To say like, okay, I love you and I will continue to love you.
Yeah. Like stop and understand the weight of that. You know, like it's
powerful.
Yeah. What would you say is like, I guess overall then, like since you started playing worship and then like to today, you know, what are some of the things that you've seen God do and that have taught you even outside of school, you know, like what are some of the things that you've learned or you've struggled with worship and then come around to understand better? Or
what is worship?
Yeah,
is it just singing?
Yeah. Is it just music?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll kind of get there, but after my DTS, I went home and I worked mechanics for a bit, and then I actually went back to YWAM Denver for something called School of Worship. And again, I was kind of looking for this like practical music. How do I pick a set list? How do I pick my keys? How do I arrange a band? How do I flow a set? And they basically did almost none of that again.
You're like, okay, I want my money back. Yeah, this is two times in a row now.
What the heck? But they taught on like the first times that the word worship was used in the Bible and what that looked like. They talked about the history of worship in the church. They talked about heart of worship. They talked about creativity. They talked about like all of these things that like looking back, it's like you can learn how to do a lot of these practical steps by like, I mean, you can ask me like just from experience, like it's like trial and error and you find out what works, what doesn't work. There's like podcasts, there's like YouTube videos like crazy on how to do certain stuff. But like to understand the heart of worship, I felt like was like invaluable, right? Like you can't. So I was so glad looking back that that's what they focused on.
Yeah.
Because I think what is worship is really like a great question. And like, as someone who's like, I've been in this world for like quite a while and have had a lot of confusion around it. So if I have confusion,
right,
how much does like someone else who isn't in that world, right? Like, I don't know, maybe like just a person who attends church or whatever, what's their understanding of what worship is if I can't even like make sense of it or whatever, right? So it actually, the more I've like looked into it, it's got simpler and it's got clearer, which is good because some things you look into,
like we've overcomplicated it, you know.
I don't know. I don't know. But it's just like when you look at I mean, I've done some talks on this at like youth or whatever, but like what does the word worship, take it out of church, it's just like, you know, if someone's like, oh, they worship that, or if it's like they're like thinking about it, they're speaking words of affirmation, they're like loving in return, like you're showing your love, you're expressing your love back to God, you're worshiping God. So it just got like a lot simpler, I think. It's just like, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's complexities, like, I mean, we talk about like how there's like worship of God and then there's like leading others in worship and like how those worlds kind of like cross is like kind of crazy, but just to like worship him and like I mean, you would know the reference. I kind of remember it. Living sacrifice. Present your body as a living sacrifice to God. That's your true act of worship, right? It doesn't say anything about singing or music or, so obedience, huge, just loving God in return.
I know I've heard people say, like, even just like with their day-to-day job, like, you know, like not in ministry, but just their day to, like, you know, like, you know, I'm going to do my best at what I'm doing right now for God, you know, to honor him, to bring glory to, and to, you know, to have integrity, and for that to be, you know, again, like, it sounds silly, but I mean, like, no, like that can be a form of worship, like, you know, like doing your best, and like you said, loving others, like, and just, you know, like that, what would Jesus do? How would he, like, well, like, let me bring honor to him through that, you know? Yeah.
Doing all you do for the glory of God, right? Like that's worship. But go ahead.
We talked a few weeks ago at youth group about laying our crowns down. Like, there's the verse in Revelation where, like, everyone's before the throne, and they're laying their crowns down before the throne. Just like this beautiful picture of what it looks like when we're like, okay, we know what we want for our lives. Like, you know, if you want to be successful, or you want to, like, you know, have this, like, what we have these plans for our lives. So we're going to get married. We're going to have this many kids. Like, you know, we know what it's going to look like. But to instead, like, I like how you said, like, you walked into the YWAM environment. You're like, God, what do you have for me? Because I think even in that sense, it's like, you know, you're not walking in saying, like, I'm the greatest, like, I expect this is what I'm going to get out of it. You're like, this humbleness to come before God and say, what do you want before me? I think that's an act of sacrifice and worship too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But then it makes me think, then what is the singing worship that we see and that we know, right? If worship is this thing that we're describing, then what is this other thing? That's kind of what it makes me think about.
I think it focuses us.
Yeah.
I think it's a regular reminder that directs us. Because otherwise, do we naturally do these things without thinking?
Right.
Like, without reminders, without...
Yeah.
And I think the beauty of doing it in an assembly is fantastic, right? Like, with other people who are affirming the same thing. We're saying together, God, you are good.
Yeah.
And because music is such a, like, emotional and spiritual thing,
right?
You know, like, and it's very biblical. It's not like in modern Christianity we decided that, like, hey, we're gonna use music. Like, it's been music for a long time. It's and that's, like, why that's one of the main ways we worship is through music, because so many people can connect with that form and that way of bringing glory to his name, and to, you know, and do that together is so
that's
cool.
That's biblical too. It's like the instrument playing, right? I'm trying to remember all the weird ones that are labeled. It was like, I know lyres in there, play the lyre and the harp and the trumpet, probably the cymbal. Yeah. We know King David enjoyed a good dance down the street. Wade, you particularly have expressed over the years your love for actions in songs. You're very passionate about teaching that to people.
like Bible camp.
Wade hates action songs.
Hate's a strong word.
I think the actions you're referring to are more of a distraction than...
If it's in a sincere act of worship unto the Lord, go for it.
Yeah. But if you're doing the Mr. Bean dance to get a laugh out of people,
that's
sure.
where the line is crossed.
Are you trying to bring glory to God there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
So anyway, I'll sometimes call, like, maybe what we do at church, like, musical worship or like praise or whatever. And then, but yeah, tons of biblical examples. Like, if you even just look at, you know, Jericho or whatever, right? They, like, praised and literally brought down, like, this wall. Like, there's tons of Old Testament things where, like, the musicians would go first, like, into battle, right?
Yeah.
There's so many biblical examples of musical worship as well. And, like, kind of what Levi was saying, like, I believe God made music to be this, like, powerful thing, like, that we can use, right?
So, well, and it's powerful the other way too.
Yeah.
Like, people don't realize that there's a lot of power in music that is not bringing glory to God, that is, you know, promoting especially, like, a lifestyle. Like, I know, like, I used to just like sometimes like listen to whatever like top 40 and like, oh, you know, like this is fine. This is just like, you know, this is what's trendy right now. And then like you stopping and listening to what they're singing. I'm like, and there's something about, when you're like singing that and doing that musically, it's like, this is not like, and I remember like listening to some of these songs. I'm like, oh, like I feel just like kind of gross. Like,
we have to think about the things that we sing.
Yeah.
I take that seriously. Yeah, there's been songs in the top 40 I've been making fun of for years, right?
Yeah.
Like, and some of it's manipulative. It's like super fun.
Yeah.
My favorite is like, you make me bleed until I can't breathe. You know, like that.
I'm like, oh my gosh, what?
It's like this totally crazy, this really fun song.
Yeah.
But, you know, when we think about worship, you know, are we singing words without meaning, or are we meaning the words that we sing?
Well, and we even talked about this, so we're on the same worship team.
What?
And for those who don't know, and we have like a little devotional before we do like a rehearsal or a practice. And where was it going with this?
The truth.
Oh yeah, like the like song selection. You know, we're not just picking any song that sounds good or is popular.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about that process? I think you even mentioned once, like you're like, if it's not something I would say genuinely myself, then I don't feel comfortable like leading it.
Yeah. So I have the job, the responsibility, the privilege as worship pastor to kind of screen the songs that come in that are suggested, the ones that we start singing at church and at youth. And like, it's just so important. Like Alicia said, that what we're singing is true, because it seeps into your heart and your brain, and it becomes the way you see the world and the way you think. So it actually forms your theology, which is just like the way you see God, right? So like, it's so important that the songs that we sing are truth. So I'll look at songs and like, I have a little bit of Bible training, not as much as Alicia, but I have like a year of biblical studies, and I'll go through them. And if I'm not sure, I'll pass it off to like Steve or Alicia and be like, what do you guys think of this? Because it's a song we're considering. If there's something that's like, I'm not quite sure of, but we're really careful about that, because we want to be singing truth. We want to be singing what's lined up with Scripture. We want to be having this true, informed perspective of who God is. So that's like our number one priority. And then after that, there's like some other criteria that we could go through, like what do we think the church needs to sing right now? Does it need to be in celebration and praise, or reflective, contemplative? How much do I connect with this song personally? Is it well known? Is it on the radio? Does it sound good? Those questions can kind of all come after.
Yeah,
is it
the
truth?
most important one, right? Yeah. And I think, like I know there's Sundays where we've played like, you know, like, I think there was just like kind of a hard time through COVID, and that we were like singing a song that like, I don't know, like there's some news came out and people are kind of like feeling a bit down, and then we're like, maybe we should put this song on hold for a bit, because like it was like wasn't connecting with people, right? Like,
not where we were
I think
at.
it's to be sensitive to what people are also going through, to like, you know, to meet that.
Right. Yeah. And then the flip side of that is declaring truth. Yeah. Even when you're not currently experiencing the joy of the Lord, but you know the joy of the Lord is a real thing, and then you're going to declare it anyways. That's kind of that's true. The flip side. But I know what you're saying. There's you want to be genuine. Yeah.
And you don't want to be like tone deaf to what the congregation is.
Oh yeah.
You know. Yeah. Experiencing. Yeah.
So last week we interviewed Ruben, and Levi made us share embarrassing stories. And there's something that's really fun about worship, is that there's often worship fails. Do you have any good stories, even about someone else, where you've witnessed them failing really hard that we might think is funny?
Yeah, I like following worship fails on Instagram.
Worship fails are the best. Yeah. For so many reasons. Man, what can I think of? Like, there's definitely, it's funny because things got ramped up a lot during COVID because like everything's on video right now.
Everyone's
Like
live streaming.
so many churches started live streaming. So like the amount of worship fails, I'm sure went up exponentially.
Yeah.
Because everything's captured, right?
Yeah.
Before that,
which is great.
Yeah.
It's just so fun.
Before that, it wasn't captured. So, I mean, and like I believe in doing my best for God. So like we have worked really hard, and we've come a long way at just like giving God this amazing offering of worship. But there was like a time, maybe a little further back where maybe more major mistakes happen. Like, and I've started songs like with the wrong capo and then the band has to stop, or like fully the wrong rhythm or timing. Like, so much songs are in 4/4 that like sometimes when there's one in 3/4, like I can't even get 3/4 in my head.
Yeah.
So I'm like strumming 4/4, even though the song's supposed to be in 3/4. And then the band tries to come in and it's just like a train wreck. So there's definitely lots of those.
I remember Tyler once dropped his guitar, but it didn't make it on the screen.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
And then you gave him
like his
something so
strap
that
just
now,
came loose.
so now it won't anymore.
Strap locks. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like a few, like I know.
I threw my stick once.
Yeah. So like
There's
Out
some
of rage?
No.
did you get hit in the head or that? I'm
No,
thinking my brother used to do like, he would be just jamming. He'd be like, and just like hit
I
himself.
went to so there's been times where I've dropped a stick and it's like just on the floor and I can quickly grab it because it's like, or it's just like sitting on the floor tom or something. But I went to like go and hit the crash and the ride at the same time.
Yeah.
And when I raised my left hand, I guess my hands were sweaty enough that it just like slipped out.
Yeah.
And like went on the other side of the kit. So there was like
You didn't
no
have
way I could quickly grab it.
Did you have a spare stick or no?
No, so all the spare sticks that were there, I think were just like broken.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, okay. Like in that moment, I'm like, okay, I have to get up and grab it because I can't continue.
Just start like hitting the
Like halftime.
Yeah, it would sound so horrible. Yeah, so I remember, and it was like right at the start, like at like the end of a bridge or something. So like we were building, and then we were supposed to keep going into this big course, and so it dropped out. And I remember everyone like turned around, like, "Are we supposed to come out there?" Because like, and I grabbed my stick and then kept going. But it was good timing because the camera guy says to me after, he's like, "Levi, I have to apologize to you." And I was like, "Oh, what's up?" And he's like, I like the drums, so like every now and then I'll get a shot of the drums. I'll have it on the live feed.
On you.
And I'm like, no. And he's like, yeah, I had the camera right on you when it happened. I was like, oh my gosh, I guess at least people understand now why it dropped down, but yeah, it was.
Yeah, I kind of wish we would, like, I've been bugging Levi because Levi does all the camera stuff to put together a little worship fails of our own. There's a few good ones.
Oh, there's one you did.
I had an electric guitar intro that was like way forward in the mix so that you could hear what I was doing. And I was just like one fret off and it was so sour and it stuck out so bad.
Yeah, there's some that like are subtle enough you don't notice.
You can't really
but that
tell.
one was like, I remember I was listening to it all afternoon. I thought it was so funny.
Yeah.
I messed up the words once so bad I just started mumbling things and then I stopped and said I'm sorry and waited until I could start again. That was a good one for me.
I'm sorry.
I want to tell Davis this too. Do you want to pull up his question while I?
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Like, it was on my team, and Kyle was singing, and Kyle was praying, and I think he had messed up a key and thought it was funny because then he's like he's playing keys directly behind Kyle on the camera because Kyle's praying. Like it's this moment, and Davis is laughing.
He's laughing, yeah.
And he can't stop laughing, and he realizes he's on camera, and he's just like can't stop laughing.
Yeah, we had one question submitted.
And I think we have to answer it because we
From
didn't
Davis.
answer his last one that he submitted, and he made a comment about that. So
How do I worship so I can effectively, or so I can attract godly women? But he's asking for a friend. He's
asking for a friend.
He's not asking for himself.
You know, it's so good. We have so many people out there willing to ask these hard questions on behalf
For
of
their
their
friends.
friends.
So thoughtful.
Is
Yeah.
it just one friend? Everyone, like this one person's afraid
Just
to
has
ask,
a
and
lot
everyone's
of
saying,
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
For this
all
one
one
friend.
person.
Yeah. Like, hey, can you ask for me?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
I think they're missing the point of worship.
Have you seen that?
Davis's friend.
Is it? Yeah, Davis's friend. I think his name's like Tim Hawkins or something like that. He's like a Christian comedian.
Yeah.
And he has like the different, like he's like,
The different
okay,
hand holding.
Yeah, you're like, holding the TV, holding the widescreen,
Yeah.
touchdown. Like he has all these different worship
Or
moves.
the Starbucks coffee holders.
He's like praised coffee,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just watch some Tim Hawkins and learn some moves.
Yeah.
I think the women will be impressed
Yeah.
by that.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. Pass it on to your friend Davis.
Yeah. Whoever this friend is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was still thinking about worship fails. I was thinking of, so I know, Angela had one where like, so we try
what was
not
that
to
one?
use music stands. So the words are on the back wall, but if the person running lyrics is like behind, or if the computer crashes, I think the computer crashed. Anyway,
Yeah.
she was, I think it was "Oh Come to the Altar." Anyway, she was just like, they kind of worked, but she was kind of making up words.
Yeah. She was like trying to remember the words because it was like this verse, and then I think she got them like half flipped
Are you
around.
hurting within? Or
Yeah,
something
something
like that.
Yeah, it was funny.
And there was one time I was band leading, and Alex was, and he was headed somewhere, but I called out something, and then he was kind of like halfway through a word, and just, oh man, they're so good. But we need to compile them for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like, I mean, when someone just like misses a note, it's like, okay, like that's just not like that funny. But yeah, like when it's like a really sour note, or like
And it just keeps going.
the lyrics, like, or I'm sorry. Let me just start over. Yeah.
The painful thing with being a singer too is in-ears. And sometimes you think you sound so good, and then you listen to it online and you never want to sing ever again.
I've seen lots of memes
Like,
about
what have
that
I
lately.
done?
It's
And
like,
you figure out
yeah.
you figure out your mix, and it like actually does get better, but there's something to it.
yeah, your in-ear mix is really important.
Yeah.
Which makes me think of something else. I feel like there's been times throughout the years where I've been humbled by the Holy Spirit.
That's good for us.
I feel like maybe, my ego has gotten to me, and then a worship fail happens to me, and I'm like, oh, right, I'm not here to impress anyone. So I don't know if you've ever experienced that, like just kind of like your attitude and your posture on stage, and like ego of like, oh, I'm so good. Like, how have you worked through that?
Yeah, there's
Because like, it's like you're using like a talent that's impressive.
Thank you.
How do you how do you keep that ego
that it's not
aside?
about you.
That it's not about you.
Yeah.
That it's about God, and that we are serving God. We're not here to impress. We're not here to bring glory to ourselves.
Well, there's a few things. One of them is like maybe to my favor that I'm like naturally pretty hard on myself, and I hold myself, and it kind of bleeds over into others, which is like a lesson I've been learning on like just like holding people to a standard, holding myself to a standard. So I'm naturally fairly hard on myself. So it tends to help me not get like a big head, because I can easily pick out all the like flat notes or like wrong chords that I did. That's one little thing. That's not a very like spiritually deep thing, but that's like one thing that's just like, I don't know. I'm just like,
I'm human.
and I just, I hear my own mistakes. So that's one small thing. I was listening to a podcast, and there's these great worship leaders, and they were just talking about kind of like being open to what God had before a worship set, being humble, in just that, like, you're going into this thing and you're like, God, we really can't do anything apart from you. Like, and I should be better at scriptures, but it's like, the builders build, I can't remember what it was, but if it's not, I'm totally butchering this. It's going to be in vain if it's not for what God does, basically, right? Uh-huh. I think
it's not worship if we're not doing it for God.
Yeah, it's just that we can't do anything of eternal value, like as humans.
Right.
Like you can't make someone become a Christian. You can't soften someone's heart. You can't teach them the love of God. You can't. There's so many things that only God can do.
Yep.
Through us.
Yeah, so God chooses to partner with us. Sometimes I'll use the metaphor of like, a ship with a sail, and it's like we cannot make the wind blow.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. We can put up a sail. So when our sail's up and the wind blows, the ship moves, right? So I think just coming into a worship set and being like, God, if you want to do something of eternal value, I would love to like partner with you in that. If you want to soften hearts, if you want to draw people closer to you, if you want to impart, a word of revelation or wisdom or vision, I would love to be a part of that. But I got like 4, maybe 5 chords and a capo and like my untrained voice.
Right.
Like that's all. Like I'm like, this is what I have. It's kind of like the fish and the loaves, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like the little boy brings those things and he's like, this
Yeah.
is what I've got. And you bring them and then God takes them and he multiplies them, right? And he feeds the thousands, right? So it's like you come into a worship set and like you have nothing apart from God. So then to be cocky about it, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just take a step back. If you're feeling cocky, take a step back and like who gave you your fingers? Who
Yeah.
gave you your voice?
Yeah.
Like it's so, if you take a logic, I like logic. It's
Yeah.
like you take a step back. It's like, okay, you have nothing. And then there's literally times where I like have, maybe like a bit of pride creeping in, and
Right.
I'm like, you better be careful. God could humble
Yeah.
you in a split
Uh-huh.
second. You know what I mean? Like you'll play one fret off and every, you know,
Well, that's the
you
thing.
know
It's
what
like-
I mean? Like,
I mean,
it's
that
like-
Sunday when I threw my stick, I should have just had less sweaty hands. But like,
Yeah.
there's like Sundays where I'm like, I've been playing. I'm like, oh man, like I've got it locked in. Like I'm so good.
Yeah.
And then like I fumble something. I'm like, right.
Yeah.
Like it's just, it's
Yeah.
those humbling experiences to remind me that like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pride cometh before the fall. It's like, in a split second.
Do
Yeah.
either of you watch reality TV at all?
No.
HGTV?
It's like one of my favorite things on like any show where you get voted off for any reason. Anytime someone is like, I feel really confident. You're
Yeah.
like, I know you're not supposed to feel that way in this game, but I feel really confident. Like they are gone that
they're
week.
gone,
It's
yeah.
hilarious to watch. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is something to it.
What was I going to ask you? Should have written this down. There was something else I was going to ask you. I think that people misunderstand and has been criticized a lot. Oh, this is what I was going to ask you. Is it wrong to play a song from a church that maybe has bad theology?
Oh.
So like your
Thanks, Levi.
elevation
getting
worship,
real.
your Jesus culture, your
What
Hillsong.
have they
your-
done?
Well, I mean, like just like these, these big churches that like are
This
the
is
ones
a hot
producing
topic, Levi.
all the worship music, and there's maybe some where like like maybe one of the pastors preaches something that is theologically not that sound,
Yeah.
but we play one of their songs.
Right.
How do you feel about that? What
Yeah.
I think there's some people that think that like, well, we should just not play that
Right.
because that's connected to this church.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
So I do have some opinions. I don't know if they're conclusive. So I'm still,
I think it kind of relates back to like what you were saying earlier that like you went to this thing. It's like, don't just like throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like,
I think like we kind of live in this like celebrity cancel culture, and like there's so many debates and so many discussions you could have about whether that's good or bad or whatever. Like, should Hillsong or Elevation have as much influence as they do or whatever?
Right.
Right.
I don't know. I didn't build the system.
yeah,
I'm kind of in the system as a part of the system now. I kind of think it's like you said with the baby and the bathwater with the meat and the bones, and there is a lot of questions to consider, and one of them unfortunately is like the money side of things and the business side of things, and I actually am like a little bit ignorant to that and how all those things work. Also, I'm also a little ignorant to what famous Christians have done or haven't done. And like, I don't know, I just kind of like not knowing.
Right.
I don't know if that's like really, like if someone did, I don't know. like, who's that? Is it Ravi Zacharias? That like, there's just like a few guys and you're like, okay, what do we do with all their teachings? They have so many true teachings, but now whatever.
Yeah.
So
that's the problem with any church becoming really famous, though, honestly. Is like, I've always said this, I'm like, churches, our biggest problem is we're full of people.
right.
And so like people are people. We're going to
People
make
screw up.
mistakes. And I think the bigger,
People
like
sin.
the more famous you are, the higher profile you are, the more influence you have.
Right.
You know, the more
And I
careful
think
you have
this
to
is
be.
somewhere some damage can happen, and maybe we can do some damage control. Is like people often put their faith in
Yep.
in people rather than Jesus.
Right.
So, you know, like I hear stories of like this band, they were like a Christian band, and I discovered them quite a few years ago now, and like they had some like really cool, unique style of music. And then I saw on BuzzFeed they did this video of like the reason they left their mega church job. And they go on about how hurt they were by this church and how burnt out they were, and how people didn't respect their privacy and all these things. And it was like, so it was all things people did to you. Like, what did Jesus do to you? But the thing was that, I mean, their faith was in the system. Their faith was
Right.
in, you know, people's faith was in Ravi Zacharias, you know, and then this stuff comes out about him. It's like, well, of course your faith is going to fall apart because your faith was in him and not Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, we look to people to teach about God, but when our faith is like, it's like when you're a kid, you know, you grow up and your faith is kind of based on what your parents believe. You haven't really quite taken ownership of it yet. You know, for me, when I grew up and I started going to youth, I started taking ownership because I was maturing, starting to understand a little bit better what it meant for me to live day to day for Jesus and for him, and live my life for him. But I think there's still people making the mistake of like, oh, my faith is in Stephen Furtick. Oh, my faith is in Brian Johnson from Hillsong. Oh, my faith is in all these celebrity Christians, and then they screw up because we've put them on this pedestal, and the enemy wants to take them out, and then we're like, oh, like your faith is struggling now. He's like, if they fail, is God even real?
It happens in the local church too.
Yeah.
In all kinds of ways. If your senior pastor leaves, a lot of times people just leave too.
Oh, yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
I only like his preaching.
Yeah. It's funny because this is like a huge, there's so many angles, right? Like you could talk about forgiveness. You could talk about hurt in the church, or the church hurting you, which like, I know like some awful things have been done in the name of Jesus, like crusades, or like, you know what I mean? Like all of these things, but like Alicia was saying, it's like the church is a body of people who have a sinful nature, who screw up, who make mistakes. So then,
and who have been forgiven. But, you know, it's,
And like kind of what I was saying earlier with like God choosing to partner with us in doing something of eternal value. It's like he chose to use the local church, right? Like he calls the church his bride, and he loves the church, right?
Yeah.
So like you can't even say, you know, like I love Jesus, but I don't love the church, because the church is his bride, and the church is broken, and God is using this broken thing to fulfill his plans. So there's like that side of it, right? And then there's
like if you're in an abusive situation at like a job or something in ministry where you're getting burnt out, like that's a separate issue. Like, you do need to have some boundaries, like go find somewhere that is life-giving and that is supportive and respectful. But
Levi's actually really good with boundaries. Anyone needs to have boundaries in their life. Just talk to Levi. He's really good at helping other people set them too. It's very good. I have a slightly more lighthearted question for you. I don't know if you have a bunch more questions. This is my last question for you.
Okay.
So we work with teenagers. Why should a teenager join a worship team? Why should they think about doing this? Why should I maybe pick up an instrument or make this part of my life?
There's so many reasons. I was always taught that 100% of the church should be doing 100% of the work. And in reality, it's more like 10% of the church is doing 100% of the work. And then you're getting into
like the volunteer work.
Then you're getting into burnout, and you're getting into There's just like a lack of volunteers and all of that. I find that serving, which is what we're doing on a worship team, we are serving God and we're serving the people. It just like, there's so many upsides to serving. Like it gets your focus off yourself and your own problems. It puts it on other people and God, and you get to be a part of a team. You get to grow together. You find community. If you notice when you're hanging out with friends and like, say there's like, I don't know, maybe there's like an awkward whatever time in the conversation, or you don't know what to do. Normally you're both, the focus isn't each other, it's what you're doing together, right? So if you turn inward, it's not going to work. But if you're like, okay, what are we doing together? I think music is like super, super fun. Making something beautiful with more than like I'm not like a painter or anything, but like imagine, it's just something about the camaraderie or like the group of people making
collaboration, coming together and working together
that
to
sounds
honor God.
so nice together, and then it having this purpose of leading others in worship, of having the focus on God. So it's like, I mean, like I'm not against, like being just like in a garage band or anything like that in any way, but like sometimes I'll have these realizations. It's like we get to do the cool aspects of that, but then to have this like purpose on top of that, of leading others in worship or bringing glory to God directly or whatever. So I think, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah,
there's like
good.
a lot of reasons, like music's super fun too. So yeah.
Yeah, if you have questions about music, talk to Wade. About being involved in a worship team or even for youth, talk to me.
Clearly about how to attract women.
Yeah, right. That's the reason. But yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Thanks, Wade, for coming on.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks
Chatting
so
about
much
this.
for having me.
I'm sure we'll have you on again.
It was fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Adios.